For centuries, the Islamic caliphates have been wrapped in the shimmering myth of a golden age, a world of science, poetry, and shining cities. But behind that polished facade lay a darker, hidden machinery of cruelty. Even Muslim chroniclers recorded the brutality: child slavery, mass castration, suffocating taxes, and the erasure of entire cultures. These weren't accidents of war, but policies of power. If the sword won battles, it was systematic child theft that kept the empire strong. So, what really happened during this age that's lost to history? Let's delve into the dark ages of the Islamic Caliphate that'd make a mockery of the medieval age of brutality. The devshirme, the blood tax of children. History doesn't unfold in straight lines. It bleeds, twists, and tells stories stranger than any myth. We're used to hearing about the Ottoman Empire's dazzling architecture, its poetry, its advances in science, and the feared might of its armies. But what doesn't always make the history textbooks is the quiet horror of how that power was built. And more disturbingly, who built it? At the heart of Ottoman expansion was a practice so chilling that it came to be known as the devshirme, or blood tax. Every few years, Ottoman officials rode into Christian villages across the Balkans, not for grain, not for livestock, but for children. Families lived in dread of the day soldiers would arrive. Boys between the ages of 8 and 18 were lined up, inspected like cattle, and chosen for their strength, intelligence, or even just the look in their eyes. Parents could do nothing, resist, and the punishment was often death for the entire family. Mothers wept openly as their sons were dragged away. Fathers stood powerless, watching generations of lineage vanish in a single afternoon. Between the 14th and 19th centuries, historians estimate that 500,000 to 1 million Christian boys were taken in this way. And here's the cruelest irony. These stolen sons weren't just lost. They came back as enemies. The boys were marched to Istanbul, where their old identities were systematically destroyed. They were stripped of their names, their language, and their religion. The Ottomans were masters of psychological warfare. Children were told their Christian families had abandoned them, that only the Sultan had saved them from ignorance. In their place, the Sultan became their father, the empire their family. Some were sent to Turkish farming families, forced to learn the language and customs. Others went straight into military schools. Conversion to Islam wasn't a choice. It was part of the indoctrination. Over time, boys forgot the prayers their mothers whispered, the hymns their fathers taught, the very sound of their native tongues. And what did they become? The Janissaries, the Sultan's elite infantry, feared across Europe and the Middle East. The Janissaries were unlike any other military force of the time. They were Europe's first true standing army since the Roman legions. They trained relentlessly, lived in barracks, and were forbidden from marrying or engaging in trade. Their lives were a strange mix of monastic discipline and brutal military drill. Their bond was cemented in rituals like the Kasha Kardashli, or Brotherhood of the Spoon. They dined from the same pot, carried spoons in their caps to symbolize their shared existence, and were taught that they were not just soldiers, but brothers. Spiritual guidance came from the Bektashi Sufi order, adding a mystical dimension to their loyalty. They weren't just fighting for pay. They believed they were part of something holy, something greater. With muskets, sabers, and the thunderous march of the Metter Band, the world's oldest military band, they became the hammer of the Sultan's will. For conquered Christian families, the ultimate cruelty was this. The sons they had lost returned as disciplined warriors who helped conquer more Christian lands. A cycle of loss and betrayal that repeated for centuries. Of course, parents didn't just sit back. Entire communities developed desperate ways to resist the blood tax. Some families injured their sons, blinding them in one eye, breaking bones, to make them undesirable. Others hid them in forests and mountains during the levy years, whispering prayers that the soldiers would pass by without finding them. But the Ottoman system was thorough. The collectors were meticulous, records were kept, and few boys escaped once chosen. And so, across generations, Christian villages were hollowed out of their strongest and brightest.